good evening, everyone. So, what's better than one thing than two things, yeah? Or two book recordings. But we're gonna be doing different ones each time, yeah? Yeah, no. Um, so... Today, we're gonna be reading another book. This book is tremendously longer than the other one. I mean, just look at the chapters, yeah? There's still multiple volumes, just like the other one. But look how many chapters per volume. Volume 1 has 27 chapters, all on its own. It's absolutely crazy. So, anyways, and not just that. But look at how long the chapters are. Alright, this is just the start of chapter 1, yeah? It starts here. All of that. All of it. Is chapter 1. It's crazy. So, anyways, let's begin, yeah? You all should be able to hear me, yeah? Okay. Now, this book is going to be the Count of Monte Cristo. I remember seeing this movie when I was really, really, really young. I liked it, but I didn't quite understand the gist of any of it. I can tell you that this one's going to be a really long read. However, I'm not going to go more than a few hours. I'll continue to read afterwards, and we'll go from there, yeah? Okay. Anyways, there are over 117 chapters, and each one is going to be super long. So, without further ado, let's begin. Volume 1. Chapter 1. Marseilles, the Arrival. On the 24th of February, 1815, the lookout at Notre Dame de la Garde signaled the three-master of Faro from Cimera, Trieste, and Naples. As usual, a pilot put off immediately, and routing Chateau d'If, got on board the vessel between Cape Morgiou and Rion Island. Immediately, according to custom, the ramparts of Fort Saint-Jean were covered with spectators. It is always an event at Marseilles for a ship to come into port, especially when this ship, like the Pharaon, has been built, rigged, and laid in at the old Fosse docks, and belongs to the owner of the city. The ship drew on and had safely passed the strait, which some volcanic shock had made between Calasarane and Jaros Islands, had doubled Pomigu, and approached the harbor under topsails, jib, and spanker, but so slowly and sedately that the idlers, with that instinct which is the forerunner of evil, asked one another what misfortune could have happened on board. However, those experienced in navigation saw plainly that, if any accident had occurred, it was not to the vessel herself, for she bore down with all the evidence of being skillfully handled, the anchor a cockbill, the jib boom guys already eased off, and standing by the side of the pilot, who was steering the Pharaon toward the narrow entrance of the inner port, was a young man with activity and vigilant eye, watched every motion of the ship, and repeated each direction of the pilot. The vague disquietude which prevailed among the spectators had so much affected one of the crowd that he did not wait for the arrival of the vessel in the harbor, but jumping into a small skiff, desired to be pulled alongside the Pharaon, which he reached as she rounded into La Reserve Basin. When the young man on board saw this person approach, he left his station by pilot and, hat in hand, leaned over the ship's bulwark. He was a fine, tall, slim young fellow of 18 or 20, with black eyes and hair as dark as a raven's wing, and his whole appearance bespoke that calmness and resolution peculiar to men accustomed from their cradle to contend with danger. "Ah, is it you, Dante?" cried the man in the skiff. "What's the matter, and why have you such an air of sadness aboard?" "A great misfortune, Moral," replied the young man. "A great misfortune, for me especially. Off Civita Vecchia we lost our brave Captain Leclerc." "And the cargo?" inquired the owner eagerly. "It is all safe, Moral. I think you will be satisfied on that head. But poor Captain Leclerc—" "What happened to him?" asked the owner, with an air of considerable resignation. "What happened to the worthy captain?" "He died." "Fell into the sea?" "No, sir. He died of brain fever in dreadful agony." Then, turning to the crew, he said, "Oh, bear a hand there to take in sail." All hands obeyed, and at once the 8 or 10 seamen who composed the crew sprang to their respective stations at the spanker brails and out topsail, sheets and halyards, the jib down all, and the topsail clew lines and blunt lines. The young sailor gave a look to see that his orders were promptly and accurately obeyed. and then turned again to the owner. "And how did this misfortune occur?" inquired the latter, resuming the interrupted conversation. "Alas, sir, in the most unexpected manner, after a long talk with the harbor master, Captain Leclerc left Naples greatly disturbed in mind. In 24 hours he was attacked by a fever and died 3 days afterwards. We performed the usual burial service, and he is at his rest, sewn up in his hammock with a 36-pound shot at his head and his heels off Giglio Island. We bring to his widow his sword and cross of honor. It was worth while, truly," added the young man with a melancholy smile, "to make war against the English for 10 years, and to die in his bed at last, like everybody else." Why, you see, Edmond," replied the owner, who appeared more comforted at every moment, "we are all mortal, and the old must make way for the young. If not, why, there would be no promotion. And since you assure me that the cargo is all safe and sound and moral, take my word for it, and I advise you not to take 25,000 francs for the profits of the voyage." Then, as they were just passing the round tower, the young man shouted, "Stand by to lower the topsails and jib. Brail up the spanker." The order was executed as promptly as it would have been on board a man of war. "Let go and clew up." At this last command, all the sails were lowered, and the vessel moved almost imperceptibly onwards. "Now, if you would come on board, immoral," said Dantes, observing the owner's impatience, "here is your supercargo, M. Danglars, coming out of his cabin, who will furnish you with every particular. As for me, I must look after the anchoring and dress the ship in mourning." The owner did not wait for a second invitation. He seized a rope which Dante flung to him, and with an activity that would have done credit to a sailor, climbed up the side of the ship, while the young man, going to his task, left the conversation to Danglars, who came towards the owner. He was a man of 25 or 26 years of age, of unproposing countenance, obsequious to his superiors, insolent to his subordinates, and this, in addition to his position as responsible agent on board, which is always obnoxious to the sailors, made him as much disliked by the crew as Edmond Dantes was beloved by them. "Well, immoral," said Danglars, "you have heard the misfortune that has befallen us?" Yes, poor Captain Leclerc. He was a brave and honest man, and a first-rate seaman, one who's seen long and honorable service, as became a man charged with the interests of a house so important as that of Morel and Son. "But," replied the owner, glancing after Dante, who was watching the anchoring of his vessel. "It seems to me that a sailor needs not be so old as you say, Danglars, to understand his business, for our friend Edmond seems to understand it thoroughly, and not to require instruction from anyone." "Yes," said Danglars, darting Edmond a look gleaming with hate. "Yes, he is young, and youth is invariably self-confident. Scarcely was the captain's breath out of his body when he assumed command without consulting anyone, and he caused us to lose a day and a half at the island of Elba instead of making for Marseilles direct." "As to taking command of the vessel," replied Morrel, "that was his duty as captain's mate. As to losing a day and a half at the island of Elba, he was wrong, unless the vessel was in need of repairs. The vessel was in as good condition as I am, and as I hope you are, Morrel, and this day and a half was lost from pure whim, for the pleasure of going ashore and nothing else." "Dante," said the ship-owner, turning towards the young man, "come this way." "In a moment, sir," answered Dante, "and I'm with you." Then calling to the crew, he said, "Let go!" The anchor was instantly dropped, and the chain ran rattling through the porthole. Dante continued at his post in spite of the presence of the pilot, until this maneuver was completed, and then he added, "Half-mast the colors and square the yards." "You see," said Danglars, "he fancies himself a captain already, upon my word." "And so, in fact, he is. Except your signature and your partner's, Morrel." "And why should he not have this?" asked the owner. "He is young, it is true, but he seems to me a thorough seaman and full of experience." A cloud passed over Danglars' brow. "Your pardon, Morrel," said Dantes, approaching. "The vessel now rides at anchor, and I am at your service. You hailed me, I think?" Danglars retreated a step or two. "I wish to inquire why you stopped at the island of Elba." "I do not know, sir. It was to fulfill the last instructions of Captain Leclerc, who, when dying, gave me a packet for Marshal Bertrand." "Then did you see him, Edmond?" "Who?" "The Marshal." "Yes." Morrel looked around him, and then, drawing Dante to one side, he said suddenly, "And how is the Emperor?" "Very well, as far as I could judge from the sight of him." "You saw the Emperor, then?" "He entered the Marshal's apartment while I was there." "And you spoke to him?" "Why, it was he who spoke to me, sir," said Dantes with a smile. "And what did he say to you?" Asked me questions about the vessel, the time she left Marseilles, the course she had taken, what was her cargo. I believe if she had not been laden, and I had been her master, he would have bought her. But I told him I was only mate, and that she belonged to the firm Morrel and Son. "Ah, yes," he said, "I know them. The Morrels have been ship owners from father to son, and there was a Morrel who served at the same regiment with me when I was in garrison at Valence. Pardieu! And that is true, cried the owner, greatly delighted. And that was Policar Morel, my uncle, who was afterwards a captain. Dante, you must tell my uncle that the emperor remembered him, and you will see it bringing tears into the old soldier's eyes. Come, come, continued he, patting Edmond's shoulder kindly. You did very right, Dantes, to follow Captain Leclerc's instructions. Touch at Elba, although if it were known that you had conveyed a packet to the Marshal and had conversed with the Emperor, it might bring you into trouble. Hello, Tato. Welcome to you. I wonder. I do wonder. Oh, don't tell me. Don't tell me. Please tell me I have this done. Ed. Irek, Emon, Epic Luigi. Oh, I don't. Flippers. I will have to get on that. I make animated shoutouts for people, but I don't have one for you. Flippers, I'm gonna put you on my list of animated shoutouts to make. I am so sorry. Guys and gals, welcome my long-time friend Tato back to YouTube. I am delighted to see him alive and well. Streaming or not streaming, him being alive and well, that puts a smile on my face. Back to the story. Oops. I need to rebind that. How could that bring me into trouble, sir? Asked Dantes. For I did not even know what I was the bearer, and the Emperor merely made such inquiries as he would of the first comer. But, pardon me, here are the health officers and the custom inspectors coming alongside. And the young man went to the gangway. As he departed, Danglars approached and said, Well, it appears that he has given you satisfactory reasons for his landing at Porto Ferrajo. Yes, most satisfactory, my dear Danglars. Well, so much the better, said the supercargo. For it is not pleasant to think that a comrade has not done his duty. Dante has done his, replied the owner, and that is not saying much. It was Captain Leclerc who gave the order for this delay. Talking of Captain Leclerc, has not Dante given you a letter from him? To me? No. Was there one? I believe that, besides the packet, Captain Leclerc confided a letter to his care. Of what packet are you speaking, Danglars? Why, that which Dante left at Porto Ferrajo. How did you know he had a packet to leave at Porto Ferrajo? Danglars turned very red. Well, my shoutouts work differently, Tato. I feel everyone can give a shout out. Go check my buddy out at this level. Give him some love and some flippin' love. Or give him a sub and some flippin' love. I give animated shout outs. Because I want that person to know. I know they have lives. I know they only have a brief moment of time that they could spend with me before they have to resume things like food, sleep, work. So I make a shout out. I make a little mini animation just to let them know I want that brief moment to be special. which I'll be getting to sometime in the next couple of days when I have a free moment. I was passing close to the door of the captain's cabin, which was half open, and I saw him give the packet and letter to Dante. "He did not speak to me of it," replied the shipowner, "but if there be any letter, he will give it to me." Danglars reflected for a moment. "Then, Immoral, I beg of you," he said, not to say a word to Dante on the subject. I may have been mistaken." At this moment the young man returned. Danglars withdrew. "Well, my dear Dante, are you now free?" inquired the honor. "Yes, sir." "You have not been long detained?" "No. I gave the custom house officers a copy of our bill of lading. And as to the other papers, they sent a man off with the pilot to whom I gave them." "Then you have nothing more to do here?" "No. Everything is all right now." "Then you can come and dine with me." I really must ask you to excuse me, Immoral. My first visit is due to my father, though I am not the less grateful for the honor you have done me." "Right, Dante, quite right. I always knew you were a good son." "And?" inquired Dantes with sudden hesitation. "Do you know how my father is?" "Well, I believe, my dear Edmond, that I have not seen him lately." "Yes, he likes to keep himself shut up in his little room. That proves, at least, that he has wanted for nothing during your absence." Dante smiled. "My father is proud, sir, and if he had not a meal left, I doubt if he would have asked anything from anyone except from heaven." "Well then, after this first visit has been made, we shall count on you." I must again excuse myself, Immoral. After this first visit has been paid, I have another which I am most anxious to pay. "Ah, true, Dante. I forgot that there was at the Catalan someone who expects you no less impatiently than your father. The lovely Mercedes." Dante blushed. "Aha," said the shipowner. "I am not in the least surprised, for she has been to me 3 times, inquiring if there was any news of the Pharaon. Peste! Edmond, you have a very handsome mistress." "She is not my mistress," replied the young sailor gravely. "She is my betrothed." "Sometimes one and the same thing," said Morel, with a smile. "Not with us, sir," replied Dante. "Well, well, my dear Edmond," continued the owner, "don't let me detain you. You have managed my affairs so well that I ought to allow you all the time you require for your own. Do you want any money?" "No, sir. I have all my pay to take, nearly 3 months' wages." "Ah, you are a careful fellow, Edmond." "Say I have a poor father, sir." Yes, I know how good a son you are. So now hasten away to see your father. I have a son too. I should be very wroth with those who detained him from me after a 3 months' voyage. Then I have your leave, sir? Yes, if you have nothing more to say to me. Nothing. Captain Leclerc did not, before he died, give you a letter for me? He was unable to write, sir. But that reminds me, I must ask your leave of absence for some days. To get married? Yes, first, and then to go to Paris. Very good. Have what time you require, Dante. It will take quite 6 weeks to unload the cargo, and we cannot get you ready for sea until 3 months after that. Only be back again in 3 months for the Farron, added the owner, patting the young sailor on the back. Cannot sail without her captain. Without her captain! Cried Dante, his eyes sparkling with animation. Pray mind what you say, for you are touching on the most secret wishes of my heart. Is it your really your intention to make me captain of the Farron? If I were sole owner, we'd shake hands on it now, my dear Dante, and call it settled. But I have a partner, and you know the Italian proverb, Chi ha compagno, ha padrone. He who has a partner has a master. But the thing is at least half done, as you have one out of our 2 votes. Rely on me to procure you the other. I will do my best. Ah, immoral! Exclaimed the young seaman with tears in his eyes and grasping the owner's hand. Immoral! I thank you in the name of my father and of Mercedes. That's all right, Edmond. There's a providence that watches over the deserving. Go to your father. Go and see Mercedes. And afterwards, come to me. Shall I row you ashore? No, thank you. I shall remain and look over the accounts with Danglars. Have you been satisfied with him this voyage? That is according to the sense you attach to the question, sir. Do you mean he is a good comrade? No, for I think he never liked me since the day I was silly enough, after a little quarrel we had, to propose him to stop for 10 minutes at the island of Monte Cristo to settle the dispute, a proposition which I was wrong to suggest and he was quite right to refuse. If you mean as responsible agent when you ask me the question, I believe there is nothing to say against him, and that you will be content with the way in which he performed his duty. But tell me, Dante, if you had command of the Farron, should you be glad to sing Danglars' Remain? Captain or mate and moral, I shall always have the greatest respect for those who possess our owner's competence. That's right, Dante. I see you are a thoroughly good fellow, and will detain you no longer. Go, for I see how impatient you are. Then I have your leave? Go, I tell you. May I have the use of your skiff? Certainly. Then, for the present and moral, farewell, and 1,000 thanks. I hope to see you again, my dear Edmond. Good luck to you. The young sailor jumped into the skiff and sat down in the stern sheets with the order that he was put ashore at La Canabaye. The two oarsmen bent to their work, and the little boat glided away as rapidly as possible in the midst of the 1,000 vessels which choke up the narrow way which leads between the two rows of ships from the mouth of the harbor to the Quai d'Orléans. The shipowner, smiling, followed him with his eyes until he saw him spring out on the quay and disappear in the midst of the throng, which from 5 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night swarms in the famous street of La Canebière, a street of which modern Phocéens are so proud that they say with all the gravity in the world, and with that accent which gives so much character to what is said, if Paris had La Canebière, Paris would be a second Marseilles. On turning round, the owner saw Danglars behind him, apparently awaiting orders, but in reality also watching the young sailor. But there was a great difference in the expression of the two men who followed the movements of Edmond Dantes. Hello, Loudhouse. Welcome to you, Tato. It's so delighted to see you. Thank you, Paula, for your hard work today. And I'm really sorry for that unforeseen person. Continuing on. Chapter 2. Father and Son. We will leave Danglars struggling with the demon of hatred, and endeavoring to insinuate in the ear of the shipowner some evil suspicions against his comrade and fellow Dantes, who, after having traversed La Canebière, took the Rue des Noailles, and entering a small house on the left of the Allées des Mélians, rapidly ascended 4 flights of a dark staircase, holding the baluster with one hand, while with the other he repressed the beatings of his heart, and paused before a half-open door, from which he could see the whole of a small room. This room was occupied by Dante's father. The news of the arrival of the Pharaon had not yet reached the old man, who, mounted on a chair, was amusing himself by training with trembling hands the nasturtiums and sprays of clematis that clambered over the trellis at his window. Suddenly, he felt an arm thrown around his body, and a well-known voice behind him exclaimed, "Father! Dear father!" The old man uttered a cry and turned around. Then, seeing his son, he fell into his arms, pale and trembling. "What ails you, my dearest father? Are you ill?" inquired the young man, much alarmed. No, my dear Edmond, my boy, my son. No, but I did not expect you. Enjoy the surprise of seeing you so suddenly. Ah, I feel as if I were going to die. Come, cheer up, my dear father. 'Tis I, really I. They say joy never hurts, and so I came to you without any warning. Come now, do smile instead of looking at me so solemnly. Here I am, back again, and we are going to be happy. Yes, yes, my boy, and so we will. So we will, replied the old man. But how shall we be happy? Shall you never leave me again? Come, tell me all the good fortune that has befallen you. God forgive me, said the young man, for rejoicing at happiness derived from the misery of others. But, heaven knows, I did not seek this good fortune. It has happened, and I really cannot pretend to lament it. The good Captain Leclerc is dead, father, and it is probable that, with the aid of M. Morel, I shall have his place. Do you understand, father? Only imagine me, a captain at 20, with 100 Louis pay, and a share in the profits. Is this not more than a poor sailor like me could have hoped for? Yes, my dear boy, replied the old man. It is very fortunate. Well, then, with the first money I touch, I mean you to have a small house, with a garden in which to plant clematis, nasturtiums, and honeysuckle. But what ails you, father? Are you not well? 'Tis nothing, nothing. It will soon pass away. And as he said so, the old man's strength failed him, and he fell backwards. Come, come, said the young man. A glass of wine, father, will revive you. Where do you keep your wine? No, no, thanks. You need not look for it. I do not want it, said the old man. Yes, yes, father. Tell me where it is. And he opened 2 or 3 cupboards. It is no use, said the old man. There is no wine. What? No wine? Said Dante, turning pale and looking alternately at the hollow cheeks of the old man and the empty cupboards. What? No wine? Have you wanted money, father? I want nothing now that I have you, said the old man. Yet, stammered Dante, wiping the perspiration from his brow, yet I gave you 200 francs when I left 3 months ago. Yes, yes, Edmond, that is true. But you forgot at that time a little debt to our neighbor, Caderousse. He reminded me of it, telling me if I did not pay for you, he would be paid by a moral. And so, you see, lest he might do you an injury. Well, why, I paid him. But, cried Dante, it was 140 francs I owed Caderousse. Yes, stammered the old man. And you paid him out of the 200 francs I left you? The old man nodded. So that you have lived for 3 months on 60 francs, muttered Edmond. You know how little I require. Heaven pardon me, cried Edmond, falling on his knees before his father. What are you doing? You have wounded me to the heart. Never mind, for I see you once more, said the old man. And now it's all over. Everything is all right again. Yes, Here I am, said the young man, with a promising future and a little money. Here, father, here, he said. Take this, take it, and send for something immediately. And he emptied his pockets on the table, and the contents consisting of a dozen gold pieces, 5 or 6 5-franc pieces, and some smaller coin. The countenance of old Dante brightened. Whom does this belong to? He inquired. To me, to you, to us. Take it, buy some provisions, be happy, and tomorrow we shall have more. Gently, gently, said the old man with a smile. And by your leave, I will use your purse moderately, for they would say, if they saw me buy too many things at a time, that I have been obliged to await your return in order to be able to purchase them. Do as you please, but first of all, pray have a servant, father. I will not have you left alone so long. I have smuggled coffee and most capital tobacco in a small chest in the hold, which you shall have tomorrow. But hush, here comes somebody. 'Tis Caderousse, who has heard of your arrival and no doubt comes to congratulate you on your fortunate return. Ah, lips that say one thing while the heart thinks another, murmured Edmond. But never mind, he is a neighbor who has done us a service on a time, so he's welcome. As Edmond paused, the black head of Caderousse appeared at the door. He was a man of 25 or 6, and held a piece of cloth, which, being a tailor, he was about to make a note to a coat lining. What is it? What, is it you, Edmond? Back again? Said he, with a broad Marseilles accent, and a grin that displayed his ivory white teeth. Yes, as you see, neighbor Caderousse, and ready to be agreeable to you in any and every way, replied Dante, but ill concealing his coldness under the cloak of civility. Thanks, but fortunately, I do not want for anything, and it chances that at times there are others who have need of me. Dante made a gesture. I do not allude to you, my boy. No, I lent you money, and you returned it, like good neighbors, and we are quits. We are never quits with those who oblige us, was Dante's reply. For when we do not owe them money, we owe them gratitude. What's the use in mentioning that? What's done is done. Let us talk of your happy return, my boy. I had gone on the quay to match a piece of mulberry cloth when I met friend Danglars. You are at Marseilles? Yes, says he. I thought you were at Smyrna. I was, but am now back again. And where is the dear boy, our little Edmond? Why, with his father, no doubt, replied Danglars. And so I came, added Caderousse, as fast as I could to have the pleasure of shaking hands with a friend. I don't trust Caderousse. Worthy Caderousse, said the old man. He is much attached to us. Yes, to be sure I am. I love and esteem you, because honest folks are so rare. But it seems you have come back rich, my boy. continued the tailor, looking askance at the handful of gold and silver which Dante had thrown on the table. The young man remarked the greedy glance which shone in the dark eyes of his neighbor. He said negligently, this money is not mine. I was expressing to my father my fears that he had wanted many things in my absence, and to convince me he emptied his purse on the table. Come, father, added Dante, put this money back in your box, unless neighbor Caderousse wants anything, and in that case, it is at his service. No, my boy, no, said Caderousse. I am not in any want, thank God. My living is suited to my needs. Keep your money. Keep it, I say. One never has too much. But at the same time, my boy, I am much obliged by your offer, as if I took advantage of it. It was offered with good will, said Dante. No doubt, my boy, no doubt. Well, you stand well with M. Morel, I hear, you insinuating dog, you. M. Morel has always been exceedingly kind to me, replied Dante. Then you were wrong to refuse to dine with him. What? Why, did you refuse to dine with him? Said old Dante. And did he invite you to dine? Yes, my dear father, replied Edmond, smiling at his father's astonishment at the excessive honor paid to his son. And why did you refuse, my son? Inquired the old man. That I might the sooner see you again, my dear father, replied the young man. I was most anxious to see you. But it must have vexed a moral, good, worthy man, said Caderousse. And when you are looking forward to be captain, it was wrong to annoy the owner. But I explained him the cause of my refusal, replied Dante, and I hope he fully understood it. Yes, but to be captain, one must do a little flattery to one's patrons. I hope to be captain without that, said Dante. So much the better. So much the better. Nothing will give greater pleasure to all your old friends. And I know one down there behind St. Nicholas Citadel who will not be sorry to hear it. Mercedes, said the old man. Yes, my dear father, and with your permission, now I have seen you, and know you are well and have all you require, I will ask your consent to go and pay a visit to the Catalans. Go, my dear boy, said old Dante, and heaven bless you in your wife, as it has blessed me in my son. His wife, said Caderousse. Why, how fast you go on, Father Dante. She is not his wife yet, as it seems to me. No, but according to all probability, she soon will be, replied Edmond. Yes, said Caderousse, but you are right to return as soon as possible, my boy. And why? Because Mercedes is a very fine girl, and fine girls never lack followers. She particularly has them by the dozens. Really? Answered Edmond, with a smile which had in traces of slight uneasiness. Ah, yes, continued continued Caderousse, and capital offers, too. But you know, you will be captain, and who could refuse you then? Meaning to say, replied Dante, with a smile which but ill concealed his trouble, that if I were not a captain, eh, eh, said Caderousse, shaking his head. Come, come, said the sailor, I have a better opinion of you than you of women in general, and of Marseilles in particular, and I am certain that, captain or not, she will remain ever faithful to me. So much the better, so much the better. When one is going to be married, there is nothing like implicit confidence. But never mind that, my boy. Go and announce your arrival, and let her know all your hopes and prospects. I will go directly, was Edmond's reply, embracing his father, and nodding to Caderousse. He left the apartment. Caderousse lingered for a moment. Then, taking leave of old Dantes, he went downstairs to rejoin Danglars, who awaited him at the corner of the Rue Senac. Well, said Danglars, did you see him? I had just left him, answered Caderousse. Did he allude to his hope of being captain? He spoke of it as a thing already decided. Indeed, said Danglars. He is in too much a hurry, it appears to me. Why, it seems immoral has promised him the thing. So that he is quite elated about it? Why, yes. He is actually insolent over the matter. He has already offered me his patronage, as if he were a grand personage, and preferred me a loan of money as though he were a banker. Which he refused? Most assuredly, although I might have easily accepted it, for it was I who put into his hands the first silver he earned. But now Edmond Dantes has no longer any occasion for assistance. He is about to be a captain. Pooh, said Danglars. He is not one yet. Ma foi, it will be as well if he is not, answered Caderousse. For if he should be, there will be really no speaking to him. If we choose, replied Danglars, he will remain what he is, and perhaps become even less than he is. What do you mean? Nothing. I was speaking to myself. And he's still in love with the Catalane? Over head and ears. But, unless I am much mistaken, there will be a storm in that quarter. Explain yourself. Why should I? It is more important than you think, perhaps. You do not like Dante? I never like upstarts. Then tell me all you know about the Catalan. I know nothing for certain. Only I have seen things which induce me to believe, as I told you, that the future captain will find some annoyance in the vicinity of the Valets infirmaries. What have you seen? Come, tell me. Well, every time I have seen Marseilles coming into the city, she has been accompanied by a tall, strapping, black-eyed Catalan with a red complexion, brown skin, and a fierce air, whom she calls cousin. Really? And you think this cousin pays her attentions? I only suppose so. What else can a strapping chap 21 mean with a fine wench of 17? And you say that Dantes has gone to the Catalans? He went before I came down. Let us go the same way. We will stop at Le Reserve, and we can drink a glass of La Malgue while we wait for news. Come along, said Caderousse, but you pay the score. Of course, replied Danglars, and going quickly to the designated place, they called for a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Pierre Pamphile had seen Dantes pass not 10 minutes before, and assured that he was at the Catalans. They sat down under the budding foliage of the planes and sycamores, in the branches of which the birds were singing their welcome to one of the first days of spring. Hello, Bidoof. We are in fear and awe that you have now joined us. Thank you for being here. Dupe, dupe, dupe. Chapter 3. The Catalans. Beyond a bare, weather-worn wall, almost 100 paces from the spot where 2 friends sat looking and listening as they drank their wine, was the village of the Catalans. Long ago, this mysterious colony quitted Spain and settled on the tongue of lands on which it is to this day. Whence it came, no one knew, and it spoke an unknown tongue. One of its chiefs, who understood Provençal, begged the commune of Marseilles to give them this bare and barren promontory where, like the sailors of old, they had run their boats ashore. The request was granted, and 3 months afterwards, around the 12 or 15 small vessels which had brought these gypsies of the sea, a small village sprang up. This village, constructed in a singular and picturesque manner, half Moorish, half Spanish, still remains and is inhabited by the descendants of the first comers, who speak the language of their fathers. For 3 or 4 centuries they have remained on this small promontory, on which they had settled like a flight of seabirds, without mixing with the Marseilles population, intermarrying and preserving their original customs and the costume of their mother country as they have preserved its language. Our readers will follow us along the only street of this little village and enter with us one of the houses, which is sunburned to the beautiful dead leaf color peculiar to the buildings of this country, and within coated with whitewash, like a Spanish posada, a young and beautiful girl, with hair as black as jet, her eyes as velvety as a gazelle's, was leaning her back against the wainscot, rubbing her slender, delicately molded fingers a bunch of heath blossoms, the flowers of which she was picking up and strewing on the floor. Her arms, bare to the elbow, brown and mottled after those of the Arlesian Venus, moved with a kind of restless impatience as she tapped the earth with her arched and supple foot, so as to display the pure and full shape of her well-tuned leg in its red cotton, gray and blue clocked stocking. At 3 paces from her, seated in a chair, which he balanced on 2 legs, leaning his elbow on an old worm-eaten table, was a tall young man of 20 or 22, who was looking at her with an air in which vexation and uneasiness were mingled. He questioned her with his eyes, but the firm and steady gaze of the young girl controlled his look. "You see, Mercedes," said the young man, "here is Easter come around again. Tell me, is this the moment for a wedding?" "I have answered you 100 times, Fernand, and really you must be very stupid to ask me again." "Well, repeat it. Repeat it, I beg of you, that I may at last believe it. Tell me for the 100th time that you refuse my love, which had your mother's sanction. Make me understand once and for all that you are trifling with my happiness, that my life or death are nothing to you. Ah, to have dreamed for 10 years of being your husband, Mercedes, and to lose that hope, which was the only stay of my existence." "At least it was not I who ever encouraged you in that hope, Fernand," replied Mercedes. "You cannot reproach me with the slightest coquetry. I have always said to you, I love you as a brother, but do not ask from me more than sisterly affection, for my heart is another's. Is this not true, Fernand?" "Yes, that is very true, Mercedes," replied the young man. "Yes, you have been cruelly frank with me. But do you forget that it is among the Catalans a sacred law to intermarry?" "You mistake, Fernand. It is not a law, but merely a custom, and, I pray of you, do not cite this custom in your favor. You are included in the conscription, Fernand, and are only at liberty on sufferance, liable at any moment to be called upon to take arms. Once a soldier, what would you do with me, a poor orphan forlorn, without fortune, with nothing but a half-ruined hut and a few ragged nets, the miserable inheritance left by my father to my mother, and my mother to me? She has been dead a year, you know, Fernand, and I have subsisted almost entirely on public charity. Sometimes you pretend that I am useful to you, and that is an excuse to share with me the produce of your fishing, and I accept it, Fernand, because you are the son of my father's brother, because we were brought up together, and it is still more because it would give you so much pain if I refuse. But I feel very deeply that this fish, which I go and sell, and with the produce of which I buy the flax I spin, I feel very keenly, Fernand, that this is charity." "And if it were, Mercedes, poor and lone as you are, you suit me as well as the daughter of the first shipowner or that richest banker of Marseilles. What do such as we desire but a good wife and a careful housekeeper? And where can I look for these better than in you?" "Fernand," answered Mercedes, shaking her head, "a woman becomes a bad manager, and who shall say she will remain an honest woman when she loves another man better than her husband? Rest content with my friendship, for I say once more, that is all I can promise, and I will promise no more than I can bestow. You could do no. I understand, replied Fernand. You can endure your own wretchedness patiently, but you are afraid to share mine. Well, Mercedes, beloved by you, I would tempt fortune. You would bring me good luck, and I should become rich. I could extend my occupation as a fisherman, might get a place as a clerk in a warehouse, and become in time a dealer myself. You could do no such thing, Fernand. You are a soldier, and if you remain at the Catalans, it is because there is no war. So remain a fisherman, and contented with my friendship, as I cannot give you more. Well, I will do better, Mercedes. I will be a sailor. Instead of the costume of our fathers, which you despise, I will wear a finest hat, a striped shirt, and a blue jacket with an anchor on the buttons. Would not that dress please you? What do you mean? Asked Mercedes with an angry glance. What do you mean? I do not understand you. I mean, Mercedes, that you are thus harsh and cruel with me, because you are expecting someone who is thus attired. But perhaps he whom you await is inconsistent, or if he is not, the sea is to him. Fernand, cried Mercedes, I believed you when you were good-hearted, and I was mistaken. Fernand, you are wicked to call your aid jealousy and the anger of God. Yes, I will not deny it. I do wait, and I do love him of whom you speak, and if he does not return, instead of accusing him of the inconsistency which you insinuate, I will tell you that he died loving me, and me only. The young girl made a gesture of rage. I understand you, Fernand. You would be revenged on him. Because I do not love you, you would cross your Catalan knife with his dirk. What end would that answer? To lose you, my friendship, if he were conquered, and see that friendship changed into hate if you were the victor. Believe me, to seek a quarrel with a man is bad method of pleasing the woman who loves that man. No, Fernand, you will not thus give way to evil thoughts, unable to have me as your wife. You will content yourself with having me as your friend and sister. And besides, she added, her eyes troubled and moistened with tears. Wait, Fernand. You said just now that the sea was treacherous, and he has been gone 4 months, and during these 4 months there have been terrible storms. Fernand made no reply, nor did he attempt to check the tears which flowed down the cheeks of Mercedes, although for each of these tears he would have shed his heart's blood. But these tears flowed for another. He arose, paced a while up and down the hut, and then suddenly, stopping before Mercedes, with his eyes glowing and his hands clenched, Say, Mercedes, he said, once and for all, is this your final determination? I love Edmond Dantes, the young girl calmly replied, and none but Edmond shall ever be my husband. And you will always love him? As long as I live. Fernand let fall his head like a defeated man, and heaved a sigh that was like a groan, and then suddenly, looking her full in the face, with clenched teeth and expanded nostrils, said, "But if he is dead, if he is dead, I shall die too, and if he has forgotten you—" "Mercedes," called a joyous voice without. "Mercedes!" "Ah!" exclaimed the young girl, blushing with delight and fairly leaping in the excess of love. "You see, he has not forgotten me, for here he is." And rushing towards the door, she opened it. "Here, Edmond, here I am." Fernand, pale and trembling, drew back like a traveler at the sight of a serpent, and fell into the chair beside him. Edmond and Mercedes were clasped in each other's arms. The burning Marseilles sun, which had shot into the room through the open door, covered them with a flood of light. At first, they saw nothing around them. Their intense happiness isolated them from all the rest of the world, and they only spoke in broken words, which are the tokens of a joy so extreme that they seem rather the expression of sorrow. Suddenly, Edmond saw the gloomy, pale, and threatening countenance of Fernand, as it was defined in the shadow, by a movement for which he could scarcely account to himself. The young Catalan placed his hand on the knife at his belt. "Ah, your pardon," said Dante, frowning in his turn. "I did not perceive that there were three of us." Then, turning to Mercedes, he inquired, "Who is this gentleman?" "One who will be your best friend, Dante, for he is my friend, my cousin, my brother. It is Fernand, the man whom, after you, Edmond, I love the best in the world. Do you not remember him?" "Yes," said Dante, and without relinquishing Mercedes' hand clasped in one of his own, he extended the other to the Catalan with a cordial air. But Fernand, instead of responding to this amiable gesture, remained mute and trembling. Edmond then cast his eyes scrutinizingly at the agitated and embarrassed Mercedes, and then again on the gloomy and menacing Fernand. This look told him all, and his anger waxed hot. "I did not know, when I came with such haste to you, that I was to meet an enemy here." "An enemy!" cried Mercedes, with an angry look at her cousin. "An enemy in my house, do you say, Edmond? If I believed that, I would place my arm under yours and go with you to Marseilles, leaving the house to return to it no more." Fernand's eye darted lightning. "And should any misfortune occur to you, dear Edmond," she continued with the same calmness which proved to Fernand that the young girl had read the very innermost depths of his sinister thought, "if misfortune should occur to you, I would ascend to the highest point of Cape de Morgue and cast myself headlong from it." Fernand became deathly pale. "But you are deceived, Edmond," she continued. You have no enemy here. There is no one but Fernand, my brother, who will grasp your hand as a devoted friend." And at these words the young girl fixed her imperious look on the Catalan, who, as if fascinated by it, came slowly towards Edmond and offered him his hand. His hatred, like a powerless through furious wave, was broken against the strong ascendancy which Mercedes exercised over him. Scarcely, however, had he touched Edmund's hand when he felt he had done all he could do, and rushed hastily out of the house. "Oh!" he exclaimed, running furiously and tearing his hair. "Oh, who will deliver me from this man? Wretched, wretched that I am!" "Hello, Catalan. Hello, Fernand. Where are you running to?" The young man stopped suddenly, looked around him, and perceived Caderousse sitting at the table with Danglars under an arbor. "Well," said Caderousse, "why don't you come? Are you really in such a hurry that you have no time to pass the time of day with your friends?" "Particularly when they have still a full bottle before them," added Danglars. Fernand looked at them both with a stupefied air, but did not say a word. "He seems besotted," said Danglars, pushing Caderousse with his knee. "Are we mistaken? And is Dante triumphant in spite of all we have believed?" "Why, we must inquire into that," was Caderousse's reply, and turning toward the young man, said, "Well, Catalan, can't you make up your mind?" Fernand wiped away the perspiration steaming from his brow, and slowly entered the arbor, whose shade seemed to restore somewhat of calmness to his senses, and whose coolness somewhat of refreshment to his exhausted body. "Good day," he said. "You called me, didn't you?" And he fell, rather than sat down, on one of the seats which surrounded the table. "I called you because you were running like a madman, and I was afraid you would throw yourself into the sea," said Caderousse, laughing. "Why, when a man has friends, they are not only to offer him a glass of wine, but, moreover, to prevent his swallowing 3 or 4 pints of water unnecessarily." Fernand gave a groan, which resembled a sob, and dropped his head into his hands, his elbows leaning on the table. "Well, Fernand, I must say," said Caderousse, beginning the conversation with that brutality of the common people in which curiosity destroys all diplomacy, "you look uncommonly like a rejected lover." And he burst into a hoarse laugh. "Bah!" said Danglars. "A lad of his make was not born to be unhappy in love. You are laughing at him, Caderousse." "No," he replied. "Only hark how he sighs. Come, come, Ferdinand," said Caderousse. "Hold up your head and answer us. It's not polite not to reply to friends who ask news of your health." "My health is well enough," said Fernand, clenching his hands without raising his head. "Ah, You see, Danglars, said Caderousse, winking at his friend, this is how it is. Fernand, whom you see here, is a good and brave Catalan, one of the best fishermen in Marseilles, and he is in love with a very fine girl named Mercedes. But it appears, unfortunately, that the fine girl is in love with the mate of the Baron, and as the Baron arrived today, why, you understand. No, I do not understand. Poor Fernand has been dismissed, continued Caderousse. Well, and what then? Said Fernand, lifting up his head and looking Caderousse like a man who looks for someone on whom to vent his anger. Mercedes is not accountable to any person, is she? Is she not free to love whomsoever she will? Oh, if you take it in that sense, said Caderousse, it is another thing. But I thought you were a Catalan, and they told me the Catalans were not men to allow themselves to be supplanted by a rival. It was even told me that Fernand especially was terrible in his vengeance. Fernand smiled piteously. A lover is never terrible, he said. Poor fellow, remarked Danglars, affecting to pity the young man from the bottom of his heart. Why, you see, he did not expect to see Dante return so suddenly. He thought he was dead, perhaps, but perchance faithless. These things always come to us more severely when they come suddenly. Ah, ma foi, under any circumstance, said Caderousse, who drank as he spoke, and on whom the fuse of the wine began to take effect. Under any circumstances, Fernand is not the only person put out by the fortunate arrival of Dante. Is he, Danglars? No, you are right, and I should say that would bring him ill luck. Well, never mind, answered Caderousse, pouring out a glass of wine for Fernand, and filling his own for the 8th or 9th time, while Danglars had merely sipped his. Never mind. In the meantime, he marries Mercedes, the lovely Mercedes. At last he returns to do that. During this time, Danglars fixed his piercing glance on the young man, on whose heart Caderousse's words fell like molten lead. And when is the wedding to be? Oh, it's not yet fixed, murmured Fernand. No, but it will be, said Caderousse, as surely as Dante will be the captain of the Pharaon. Eh, Danglars? Danglars shuddered at the unexpected attack, and turned to Caderousse, whose countenance he scrutinized, and to try to detect whether the blow was premeditated. But he read nothing but envy in a countenance already rendered brutal and stupid by drunkenness. Well, said he, filling the glasses, let us drink to Captain Edmond Dantes, husband of the beautiful Catalan. Caderousse raised his glass to his mouth with an unsteady hand and swallowed the contents in a gulp. Fernand dashed his to the ground. Eh, stammered Caderousse. What do I see down there by the wall, in the direction of the Catalans? Look, Fernand, your eyes are better than mine. I believe I see double. You know wine is a deceiver, but I should say it was two lovers walking side by side and hand in hand. Heaven forgive me, they do not know that we could see them. They are actually embracing. Danglars did not lose one pang that Fernand endured. Do you know them, Fernand? He said. Yes, was the reply in a low voice. It is Edmond and Mercedes. Ah, see there now, said Caderousse, and I did not recognize them. Hello, Dante. Hello, lovely damsel. Come this way and let us know when the wedding is to be, for Fernand here is so obstinate he will not tell us. Hold your tongue, will you? Said Danglars, pretending to restrain Caderousse, who, with the tenacity of drunkards, leaned out of the arbor. Try to stand upright and let the lovers make love without interruption. See? Look at Fernand and follow his example. He is well behaved. Fernand, probably excited beyond bearing, pricked by Danglars as the bull is by the banderilleros, was about to rush out, for he had risen from his seat and seemed to be collecting himself to dash headlong upon his rival, when Mercedes, smiling and graceful, lifted up her lovely head and looked at him with her clear and bright eyes. At this, Fernand recollected her threat of dying if Edmond died, and dropped again heavily on his seat. Danglars looked at the two men, one after the other, one brutalized by liquor, and the other overwhelmed with love. I shall get nothing from these fools, he muttered. I am very much afraid of being here between a drunkard and a coward. Here's an envious fellow making himself boozy on wine when he ought to be nursing his wrath, and here is a fool who sees the woman he loves stolen from under his nose, and takes on like a big baby. Yet this Catalan has eyes that glisten like those of vengeful Spaniards, Sicilians, and Calabrians. And the other has fists big enough to crush an ox with one blow. Unquestionably, Edmond's star is in the ascendant, and he will marry the splendid girl. He'll be captain, too, and laugh at us all. Unless a sinister smile passed over Danglars' lips. Unless I take a hand in the affair, he added. Hello, hello, continued Caderousse, half rising, with his fist on the table. Hello, Edmond. Do you not see your friends, or are you too proud to speak to them? No, my dear fellows, I am not, replied Dante. I am not too proud, but I am happy. And happiness blinds, I think, more than pride. Ah, very well, that's an explanation, said Caderousse. And how do you do, Madame Dante? Mercedes courtesied gravely and said, That is not my name, and in my country it bodes ill fortune, they say, to call a young girl by the name of her betrothed before he becomes her husband. So call me Mercedes, if you please. We must excuse our worthy neighbor Caderousse, said Dante. He is so easily mistaken. So, then when is the wedding to take place? Then the wedding is to take place immediately, Dante? Said Danglars, bowing to the young couple. As soon as possible, Danglars. Today, all preliminaries will be arranged at my father's, and tomorrow, or the next day at the latest, the wedding festival here at La Réserve. My friends will be there, I hope. That is to say, you are invited, Danglars, and you, Caderousse. And Fernand, said Caderousse with a chuckle. Fernand, too, is invited. My wife's brother is my brother, said Edmond, and we, Mercedes and I, should be very sorry if he were absent at such a time. Fernand opened his mouth to reply. But his voice died on his lips, and he could not utter another word. Today, the preliminaries. Tomorrow, the next day, the ceremony. You are in a hurry, Captain. Danglars, said Edmond, smiling, I will say to you as Mercedes said just now to Caderousse, do not give me a title which does not belong to me. That may bring me bad luck. Your pardon, replied Danglars. I merely said you seemed in a hurry, and we have lots of time. The Pharaon cannot be under way again in less than 3 months. We are always in a happy to be happy, Danglars, for when we have suffered a long time, we have great difficulty in believing good fortune, but it is not selfishness alone that makes me thus in haste. I must go to Paris. Ah, really? To Paris? And will it be the first time that you have ever been there, Dante? Yes. Have you business there? Not of my own. The last commission of poor Captain Leclerc. You know to what I allude, Danglars. It is sacred. Besides, I shall only take the time to go and return. Yes, I understand, said Danglars, and then in a low tone he added, to Paris, no doubt, to deliver the letter which the Grand Marshal gave to him. Ah, this letter gives me an idea, a capital idea. Ah, Dantes, my friend, you are not yet registered number 1 on board the good ship Pharaon. Then, turning towards Edmond, who was walking away, a pleasant journey, he cried. Thank you, said Edmond with a friendly nod, and the two lovers continued on their way, as calm and joyous as if they were the very elect of heaven. Hello, Caston. Welcome to you. Chapter 4. Conspiracy. Danglars followed Edmond and Mercedes with his eyes until the two lovers disappeared behind one of the angles of Fort St. Nicholas. Then, turning around, he perceived Fernand, who had fallen, pale and trembling, into his chair, while Caderousse stammered out the words of a drinking song. "Well, my dear sir," said Danglars to Fernand, "here is a marriage which does not appear to make everybody happy." "It drives me to despair," said Fernand. "Do you, then, love Mercedes?" "I adore her." "For long?" "As long as I have known her, always." "And you sit there tearing your hair instead of seeking to remedy your condition. I did not think that that was the way of your people." "What would you have me do?" said Fernand. "How do I know? Is it my affair? I am not in love with Mademoiselle Mercedes. But for you, in the words of the gospel, seek, and you shall find." "I have found already." "What?" "I would stab the man, but the woman told me that if any misfortune happened to her betrothed, she would kill herself." "Pooh! Women say those things, but never do them." "You do not know Mercedes. What she threatens, she will do." "Idiot!" muttered Danglars. "Whether she kills herself or not, what matters, provided Dantes is not Compton?" "Before Mercedes should die," replied Fernand, with the accents of unshaken resolution, "I would die myself." That's what I call love," said Caderousse, with a voice more tipsy than ever. "That's love. I don't know what love is." "Come," said Danglars, "you appear to me a good sort of fellow, and hang me, I should like to help you." "Yes," said Caderousse, "but how?" "My dear fellow," replied Danglars, "you are 3 parts drunk. Finish the bottle, and you will be completely so. Drink, then, and do not meddle with what we are discussing, for that requires all one's wit and cool judgment." "I drunk," said Caderousse. "Well, that's a good one. I could drink 4 more such bottles. They are no bigger than cologne flax. Here, Pamphile, more wine." And Caderousse rattled his glass upon the table. "You were saying, sir," said Fernand, awaiting with great anxiety the end of this interrupted remark. "What was I saying? I forget. This drunken Caderousse has made me lose the thread of my sentence." "Drunk, if you like. So much the worse for those who fear wine, for it is because they have bad thoughts, which they are afraid the liquor will extract from their hearts." And Caderousse began to sing the last 2 lines of a song very popular at the time. "Tous les merchants sauvages, c'est bien pris par la deluge." That's going to frog enough. "You said, sir, you would like to help me, but—" "Yes, but I added, to help you it would be sufficient that Dantes did not marry her you love, and the marriage may easily be thwarted, methinks. And yet Dante need not die. Death alone can separate them, remarked Fernand. You talk like a noodle, my friend. And here is Danglars, who is a wide-awake, clever, deep fellow, who proved to you that you are wrong. Prove it, Danglars. I've answered for you. Say there is no need why Dante should die. It would, indeed, be a pity he should. Dante is a good fellow. I like Dante. Dante, your health. Fernand rose impatiently. Let him run on, said Danglars, restraining the young man. Drunk as he is not much out in what he says. Absence severs as well as death, and in the walls of a prison were between Edmond and Marseilles, they would be as effectually separated as if he lay under a tombstone. Yes, but one gets out of prison, said Caderousse, who, with what sense was left to him, listened eagerly to the conversation. And when one gets out, and one's name is Edmond Dante, who seeks revenge. What matters that? Muttered Fernand. And why? I should like to know, persisted Caderousse. Should they put Dante in prison? He is neither robbed, nor killed, nor murdered. Hold your tongue, said Danglars. I won't hold my tongue, replied Caderousse. I say I want to know why they should put Dante in prison. I like Dante. Dante, your health. And he swallowed another glass of wine. Danglars saw in the muddled look of the tailor the progress of his intoxication, and turning towards Fernand, said, Well, you understand there is no need to kill him. Certainly not. If, as you said just now, you have the means of having Dantes arrested. Have you, that means? It is to be found for the searching. Why should I meddle in the matter? It is no affair of mine. I know not why you meddle, said Fernand, seizing his arm. But this I know, you have some motive of personal hatred against Dante, for he himself hates his never mistaken sentiment of others. I? Motives of hatred against Dante? None, on my word. I saw you were unhappy, and your unhappiness interested me, that's all. Since you believe I act on my own account, adieu, my dear friend. Get out of the affair as best you may. And Danglars rose as if he meant to depart. No, no, said Fernand, restraining him. Stay. It is of very little consequence to me at the end of the matter whether you have any angry feeling or not against Dante. I hate him. I confess it openly. Do you find the means? I will execute it, provided it is not to kill the man. For Mercedes has declared to me she will kill herself if Dante is killed. Caderousse, who had let his head drop on the table, now raised it, looking at Fernand with his dull and fishy eyes, said, Kill Dante? Who talks of killing Dante? I won't have him killed. I won't. He's my friend, and this morning offered to share his money with me, as I shared mine with him. I won't have Dante killed. I won't. And who has said a word about killing him, muddled head? Replied Danglars. You're merely joking. Drink to his health, he added, filling Caderousse's glass, and do not interfere with us. Yes, yes, Dante, good health, said Caderousse, emptying his glass. Here's to his health. His health. Hurrah! But the means, said Fernand. Have you not hit upon any? Asked Danglars. No, you undertook to do so. True, replied Danglars. The French have superiority over the Spaniards, that the Spaniards ruminate while the French invent. Do you invent, then? Said Fernand impatiently. Waiter, said Danglars, pen, ink, and paper. Pen, ink, and paper, muttered Fernand. Yes, I am a supercargo. Pen, ink, and paper are my tools, and without my tools, I am fit for nothing. Pen, ink, and paper, then, called Fernand loudly. There's what you want on the table, said the waiter. Bring them here. The waiter did as he was desired. When one thinks, said Caderousse, letting his hand drop on the paper. There is here a witherall to kill a man more sure than if we waited at the corner with a wood to assassinate him. I have always had more dread of a pen, a bottle of ink, and a sheet of paper than a sword or pistol. The fellow is not so drunk as he appears to be, said Danglars. Give him more wine, Fernand. Fernand filled Caderousse's glass, who, like the confirmed topper he was, lifted his hand from the paper and seized the glass. The Catalan watched him until Caderousse, almost overcome by this fresh assault on his senses, rested, or rather dropped, his glass upon the table. Well, resumed the Catalan, as he saw the final glimmer of Caderousse's reason vanishing before the last glass of wine. Well, then, I should say, for instance, resumed Danglars, that if, after a voyage such as Dantes has just made, in which he touched at the island of Elba, someone were to denounce him to the Prince Procureur as a Bonapartist agent. I will denounce him, exclaimed the young man hastily. Yes, but they will make you then sign your declaration, and confront with him you have denounced. I will supply you with the means of supporting your accusation, for I know the fact well. But Dantes cannot remain forever in prison. One day or another he will leave it, and when he comes out, woe betide him who was the cause of his incarceration. Oh, I should wish nothing better than he would come seek a quarrel with me. Yes, and Mercedes, who will detest you if you have only the misfortune to scratch the skin of her dearly beloved Edmond. True, said Fernand. No, continued Danglars. If we resolve on such a step, it would be much better to take, as I do now, his pen, dip it into the ink, and write with the left hand, that the writing may not be recognized, to denounce the denunciation we propose. And Danglars, uniting practice with theory, wrote with his left hand, and in a writing reversed from his usual style and totally unlike it, the following lines, which he handed to Fernand, which Fernand read in an undertone. The Honorable, the King's Attorney, is informed by a friend of the throne and religion that one Edmond Dantes, mate of the ship Pharaon, arrived this morning from Smyrna, after having touched at Naples and Porto Ferrajo, having been entrusted by Marat with a letter for the usurper, and by the usurper with a letter for the Bonapartist committee in Paris. Proof of this crime will be found on arresting him, for the letter will be found upon him, or at his father's, or in his cabin on board the Pharaon. Very good, resumed Danglars. Now your revenge looks like common sense, for in no way can it revert to yourself, and the matter will thus work its own way. There is nothing to do now but fold the letter as I am doing, and write upon it, to the King's Attorney, and that's all settled. As Danglars wrote the address, as he spoke. Yes, and that's all settled. Yes, and that's all settled, exclaimed Caderousse, who, by a last effort of intellect, had followed the reading of the letter, and instinctively comprehended all the misery which such a denunciation must entail. Yes, and that's all settled, only it will be an infamous shame. He stretched out his hand to reach the letter. Yes, said Danglars, taking it from beyond his reach. And as what I say and do is merely in jest, and I, amongst the first and foremost, should be sorry if anything happened to Dante, a worthy Dante. Look here. And taking the letter, he squeezed it up in his hands and threw it into a corner of the arbor. All right, said Caderousse. Dante is my friend, and I won't have him ill-used. And who thinks of using him ill? Certainly neither I nor Fernand, said Danglars, rising and looking at the young man, who still remained seated, but whose eyes were fixed on the denunciatory sheet of paper flung into the corner. In this case, replied Caderousse, let's have some more wine. I wish to drink to the health of Edmond and the lovely Mercedes. You have already had too much, you drunkard, said Danglars, and if you continue, you will be compelled to sleep here, because unable to stand on your legs. Aye, said Caderousse, rising with all the offended dignity of a drunken man. I can't keep on my legs. Why, I'll wager I could go up into the belfry of an Acules without staggering too. Done, said Danglars. I'll take your bet. But tomorrow. Today it is time to return. Give me your arm, and let us go." "Very well, let us go," said Caderousse. "But I don't want your arm at all. Come, Fernand, won't you return to Marseilles with us?" "No," said Fernand. "I shall return to the Catalans." "You're wrong. Come with us to Marseilles. Come along." "I will not." "What do you mean, you will not?" "Well, just as you like, my prince. There's liberty for all the world. Come along, Danglars, and let the young gentleman return to the Catalans if he chooses." Danglars took advantage of Caderousse's temper at the moment to take him off towards Marseilles at Port Saint Victor, staggering as he went. When they had advanced about 20 yards, Danglars looked back and saw Fernand stoop, pick up the crumpled paper, and putting it into his pocket, and rush out of the arbor towards Pylon. "Well," said Caderousse, "why, what a lie he told! He said he was going to the Catalans, and he is going to the city. Hello, Fernand, you are coming, my boy." "Oh, you don't see straight," said Danglars. "He's gone right by the road to the Valets Infirmiers." "Well," said Caderousse, "I should have sworn he turned to the right. How treacherous swine is!" "Come, come," said Danglars to himself. "Now that the thing is at work, and it will effect its purpose unassisted." Oh. Hello, Ancient One. It is delightful to see you. How are you doing today, my friend? This will be the last chapter, and then we'll call it for a night, yeah? Chapter 5. The Marriage Feast. The morning sun rose clear and resplendent, touching the foamy waves into a network of ruby-tinted light. The feast had been made ready on the second floor of La Réserve, with whose arbor the reader is already familiar. The apartment destined for the purpose was spacious and lighted by a number of windows, over each of which was written in golden letters, for some inexplicable reason, the name of one of the principal cities of France. Beneath the windows, a wooden balcony extended the entire length of the house, and although the entertainment was fixated for 12 o'clock, an hour previous to that time the balcony was filled with impatient and expectant guests, consisting of the favored part of the crew of the Pharaon and other personal friends of the bridegroom, the whole of whom had arrayed themselves in their choicest costumes, in order to do greater honor to the occasion. Various rumors were afloat to the effects of the owner of the Pharaon had promised to attend the nuptial feast, but all seemed unanimous in doubting that an act of such rare and exceeding condescension could possibly be intended. Danglars, however, who now made his appearance, accompanied by Caderousse, effectively confirmed the report, stating that he had recently conversed with M. Morel, who had himself assured him of his intention to dine at La Réserve. In fact, a moment later, M. Morel appeared and was saluted with an enthusiastic burst of applause from the crew of the Pharaon, who hailed the visit of the shipowner as a sure indication that the man whose wedding feast he thus delighted to honor would ere long be first in command of the ship. And as Dante was universally beloved on board his vessel, the sailors put no restraint on their tumultuous joy at finding that the opinion and choice of their superiors so exactly coincided with their own. With the entrance of M. Morel, Danglars and Caderousse were dispatched in search of the bridegroom to convey to him the intelligence of the arrival of the important personage whose coming had created such a lively sensation, and to beseech him to make haste. Danglars and Caderousse set off upon their errand at full speed, but ere they had gone many steps, they perceived a group advancing towards them, composed of the betrothed pair, a party of young girls in attendance of the bride, by whose side walked Dante's father, the whole brought up by Fernand, whose lips wore their usual sinister smile. Neither Mercédès nor Edmond observed the strange expression of his countenance. They were so happy that they were conscious only of the sunshine in the presence of each other. Having acquitted themselves on their errand, and exchanged a hearty shake of the hand with Edmond, Danglars and Caderousse took their places beside Fernand and old Dante, the latter of whom attracted universal notice. The old man was in a suit of glistening watered silk, trimming with steel buttons, beautifully cut and polished. His thin but wiry legs were arrayed in a pair of richly embroidered clocked stockings, evidently of English manufacture, while from his three-cornered hat depended a long streaming knot of white and blue ribbons. Thus he came along, supporting himself curiously carved stick, his aged countenance lit up with happiness, looking for all the world like one of those aged dandies of 1796, parading the newly opened gardens of Luxembourg and Tuileries. Beside him glided Caderousse, whose desire to partake of the good things provided for the wedding party had induced him to become reconciled at Dante, father and son, although there still lingered in his mind a faint and unperfect recollection of the events of the preceding night, just as the brain retains on walking in morning the dim and musty outline of a dream. As Danglars approached the disappointed lover, he cast on him a look of deep meaning, while Fernand, as they slowly paced behind the happy pair, who seemed, in their own unmixed content, to have entirely forgotten that such a being as himself existed, was pale and abstracted. Occasionally, however, a deep flush would overspread his countenance, and nervousness contraction distort his features, while, with an agitated and restless gaze, he would glance in the direction of Marseilles, like one who either anticipated or foresaw some great and important event. Dante himself was simply, but becomingly clad in the dress peculiar to the merchant service, a costume somewhat between military and civil garb, and with his fine countenance, radiant with joy and happiness, a more perfect specimen of manly beauty could scarcely be imagined. Lovely as the Greek girls of Cyprus or Chios, Mercedes boasted the same bright flashing eyes of jet and ripe round coral lips. She moved with the light, free step of an Arlesian or an Andalusian, once more practiced in the art of the great cities, would have hid their blushes beneath a veil, or, at least, have cast down their thick fringed lashes, so as have concealed their liquid luster of her animated eyes. But, on the contrary, the delighted girl looked around her with a smile that seemed to say, "If you are my friends, rejoice with me, for I am very happy." As soon as the bridal party came into sight of La Réserve, and Morel descended and came forth to meet it, followed by the soldiers and sailors there assembled, to whom he had repeated the promise already given, that Dante should be the successor to the late Captain Leclerc. Edmond, at the approach of his patron, respectfully placed the arm of his affianced bride within that of M. Morel, who, forthwith conducting her up the flight of wooden steps leading to the chamber in which the feast was prepared, was gaily followed by the guests, beneath whose heavy tread the slight structure creaked and groaned for the space of several minutes. "Father," said Mercedes, stopping when she had reached the center of the table, "sit, I pray you, on my right hand. On my left I will place him who has ever been a brother to me," pointing with a soft and gentle smile to Fernand, but her words and looks seemed to inflict the direst torture on him, for his lips became ghastly pale, and even beneath the dark hue of his complexion, the blood might be seen retreating as though some sudden pain drove it back to the heart. During that time, Dante, at the opposite side of the table, had been occupied in similarly placing his most honored guests, and Morel was seated at his right hand, Danglars at his left, and at a sign from Edmond, the rest of the company ranged themselves as soon as they found it most agreeable. They began to pass around the dusky, piquant Arlesian sausages and lobsters in their dazzling red cuirasses, prawns of large size and brilliant color, the echinus with their prickly outside and dainty morsels within, the clovis, esteemed by the epicures of the South as more than rivaling their exquisite flavor of the oyster. North, all the delicacies, in fact, that are cast up by the waves of waters on the sandy beach and styled by the great fishermen Fruits of the Sea. "A pretty silence, truly," said the old father of the bridegroom, as he carried to his lips a glass of wine the hue and brightness of the topaz, and which had just been placed before Mercedes herself. "Now, would anybody think that this room contained a happy, merry party, who desire nothing better than to laugh and dance the hours away?" "Ah," sighed Catullus, "a man cannot always feel happy because he is about to be married." "The truth is," replied Dante, "that I am too happy for noisy mirth, if that is what you meant by your observation, my worthy friend. You are right. Joy takes a strange effect at times, it seems, to oppress us, the same as sorrow." Danglars looked towards Fernand, whose excitable nature received and betrayed each fresh impression. "Why, what ails you?" he asked of Edmond. "Do you fear any approaching evil? I should say that you were the happiest man alive at this instant." "And that is the very thing that alarms me," returned Dantes. "Man does not appear to be intended to enjoy felicity so unmixed. Happiness is like the enchanted places we read of in our childhood, whose fierce fiery dragons defend the entrance and approach, and monsters of all shapes and kinds requiring to be overcome ere victory is ours. I own that I am lost in wonder to find myself promoted to an honor of which I feel myself unworthy, that of being the husband of Mercedes." "Nay, nay," cried Catullus, smiling, "you have not attained that honor yet. Mercedes is not your wife. Just assume the tone and manner of a husband, and see how she will remind you that your hour is not yet come." The bride blushed, while Fernand, restless and uneasy, seemed to start at every fresh sound, and from the time wiped away the large drops of perspiration that gathered on his brow. "Well, never mind that, neighbor Caderousse. It is not worth while to contradict me for such a trifle as that. 'Tis true that Mercedes is not actually a wife, but," he added, drawing out his watch, "in an hour and a half she will be." A general exclamation of surprise ran round the table, with the exception of the elder Dante, whose laugh displayed the still perfect beauty of his large white teeth. Mercedes looks pleased and gratified, while Fernand grasped the handle of his knife with a convulsive clutch. "In an hour?" inquired Danglars, turning pale. "How is that, my friend?" "Why, thus it is," replied Dantes. "Thanks to the influence of M. Morrel, to whom, next to my father, I owe every blessing I enjoy, every difficulty has been removed. We have purchased permission to waive the usual delay, and at 2:30 the mayor of Marseilles will be waiting for us at the city hall. Now, as 1:15 has already struck, I do not consider I have asserted too much in saying that in another hour and 30 minutes, Mercedes will have become Madame Dante." Fernand closed his eyes. A burning sensation passed across his brow, and he was compelled to support himself by the table to prevent his falling from the chair. But in spite of all of his efforts, he could not refrain from uttering a deep groan, which, however, was lost amid the noisy felicitations of the company. "Upon my word," cried the old man, "you make short work of this kind affair. Arrived here only yesterday, and married today at 3 o'clock. Commend me to a sailor for going the quick way of work." "But," asked Danglars in a timid tone, "how did you manage about the other formalities? The contract? The settlement?" "The contract," answered Dantes laughingly. "It didn't take long to fix that. Mercedes has no fortune. I have none to settle on her. So you see our papers were quickly written out, and certainly do not come very expensive." This joke elicited a fresh burst of applause. "So that we have presumed to be merely the betrothal feast turns out to be the actual wedding dinner," said Danglars. No, answered Danglars. "Don't imagine I am going to put you off in that shabby manner. Tomorrow morning I start for Paris. 4 days to go, and the same to return, with 1 day to discharge the commission entrusted to me. It is all the time I shall be absent. I shall be back here by the 1st of March, and on the 2nd I give my real marriage feast." This prospect of fresh festivity redoubled the hilarity of the guests to such a degree that the elder Dante, who, at the commencement of the repast, had commented upon the silence that prevailed, now found it difficult, amid the general din of voices, to obtain a moment's tranquillity in which to drink to the health and prosperity of the bride and bridegroom. Dante, perceiving the affectionate eagerness of his father, responded by a look of grateful pleasure, while Mercedes glanced at the clock and made an expressive gesture to Edmond. Around the table reigned that noisy hilarity which usually prevails at such a time among people sufficiently free from the demands of social position not to feel the trammels of etiquette. Such, at the commencement of the repast, had not been able to seat themselves according to their inclination, rose unceremoniously and sought out more agreeable companions. Everybody talked at once, without waiting for a reply, and each one seemed to be contented with expressing his or her own thoughts. Fernand's paleness appeared to have communicated itself to Danglars. As for Fernand himself, he seemed to be enduring the tortures of the damned. Unable to rest, he was among the first to quit the table, and, as though seeking to avoid the hilarious mirth that rose in such deafening sounds, he continued in utter silence to pace the farther end of the salon. Caderousse approached him just as Danglars, whom Fernand seemed most anxious to avoid, had joined him in a corner of the room. "Upon my word," said Caderousse, from whose mind the friendly treatment of Dante, united with the effects of excellent wine he had partaken of, had effaced every feeling of envy or jealousy at Dante's good fortune. Upon my word, Dante is a downright good fellow, and when I see him sitting there beside his pretty wife that is soon to be, I cannot help thinking it would have been a great pity to have served him that trick you were planning yesterday. Oh, there was no harm meant, answered Danglars. At first, I certainly did feel somewhat uneasy as to what Fernand might be tempted to do. But when I saw how completely he had mastered his feelings, even so far as to become one of his rival's attendants, I knew that there was no further cause for apprehension. Caderousse looked full at Fernand. He was ghastly pale. Certainly, continued Danglars, the sacrifice was no trifling one when the beauty of the bride is concerned. Upon my soul, that future captain of mine is a lucky dog. God, I only wish he would have let me take his place. Shall we not set forth? Asked the sweet silvery voice of Marseilles. 2 o'clock has just struck, and you know we are expected in a quarter of an hour. To be sure, cried Dante, eagerly quitting the table. Let us go directly. His words were re-echoed by the whole party with vociferous cheers. At this moment, Danglars, who had been incessantly observing every change in Fernand's look and manner, saw him stagger and fall back with an almost convulsive spasm against a seat placed near one of the open windows. At the same instant, his ear caught a sort of indistinct sound on the stairs, followed by the measured tread of soldiery, with the clanking of swords and military accoutrements. Then came a hum and buzz as of many voices, so as to deaden even the noisy mirth of the bridal party, among whom a vague feeling of curiosity and apprehension quelled every disposition to talk, and almost instantaneously the most death-like stillness prevailed. The sounds drew nearer. 3 blows were struck upon the panel of the door. The company looked at each other in consternation. I demand admittance, said a loud voice outside the room. In the name of the law. As no attempt was made to prevent it, the door was open, and a magistrate, wearing his official scarf, presented himself, followed by 4 soldiers and a corporal. Uneasiness now yielded to the most extreme dread on the part of those present. May I venture to inquire the reason of this unexpected visit? Said M. Morrel, addressing the magistrate, who he evidently knew. There is doubtless some mistake, easily explained. If it be so, replied the magistrate, rely upon every reparation being made. Meanwhile, I am the bearer of an order of arrest, although I most reluctantly perform the task assigned me. It must, nevertheless, be fulfilled. Who among the persons here assembled answers to the name Edmond Dantes? Every eye turned toward the young man who, in spite of the agitation he could not feel, advanced with dignity and said in a firm voice, I am he. What is your pleasure with me? Edmond Dantes, replied the magistrate. I arrest you in the name of the law. Me? Repeated Edmond, slightly changing color. And wherefore, I pray? I cannot inform you, but you will be duly acquainted with the reasons that have rendered such a step necessary at the preliminary examination. And Morrel felt that further resistance or remonstrance was useless. He saw before him an officer delegated to enforce the law, and perfectly well knew that it would be as unavailing to seek pity from a magistrate decked with his official scarf as to address a petition to some cold marble effigy. Old Dante, however, sprung forward. There are situations which the heart of a father or a mother cannot be made to understand. He prayed and supplicated in terms so moving that even the officer was touched, and, although firm in his duty, he kindly said, My worthy friend, let me beg of you to calm your apprehensions. Your son has probably neglected some prescribed form of attention in registering his cargo, and it is more than probable he will be set at liberty directly he has given the information required, whether touching the health of his crew or the value of his freight. What is the meaning of all this? Inquired Caderousse, frowning, of Danglars, who had assumed an air of utter surprise. How can I tell you? He replied. I am, like yourself, utterly bewildered at all that is going on, and cannot in the least make out what it is about. Caderousse then looked around for Ferdinand, but he had disappeared. The scene of the previous night came back to his mind with startling clearness. The painful catastrophe he had just witnessed appeared effectively to have rent away the veil which the intoxication of the evening before had raised between himself and his memory. So, he said in a hoarse and choking voice to Danglars. This, then, I suppose, is part of the trick you were concerting yesterday. All I can say is, that if it is to be so, 'tis an ill turn, and well deserves to bring double evil on those who projected it. Nonsense, returned Danglars. I tell you again, I have nothing whatever to do with it. Besides, you know very well I tore the paper to pieces. No, you did not, answered Caderousse. You merely threw it by. I saw it lying in a corner. Hold your tongue, you fool. What should you know about it? Why, you are drunk. Where is Fernand? Inquired Caderousse. How do I know? Replied Danglars. Gone, as every prudent man ought to be, to look after his own affairs, most likely. Never mind where he is. Let you and I go and see what is to be done for our poor friends. During this conversation, Dante, after having exchanged a cheerful shake of the hand with all his sympathizing friends, had surrendered himself to the officer's seat sent to arrest him, merely saying, Make yourselves quite easy, my good fellows. There is some little mistake to clear up, that's all. Depend on it. And very likely, I may not have to go so far as the prison to effect that. Oh, to be sure, responded Danglars, who had now approached the group. Nothing more than a mistake, I feel quite certain. Dante descended the staircase, preceded by the magistrate and followed by the soldiers. A carriage awaited him at the door. He got in, followed by 2 soldiers and the magistrate, and the vehicle drove off toward Marseilles. Adieu, adieu, dearest Edmond, cried Mercedes, stretching out her arm to him from the balcony. The prisoner heard the cry, which sounded like the sob of a broken heart, and leaning from the coach he cried, "Goodbye, Mercedes, we shall soon meet again." Then the vehicle disappeared round one of the turnings of Fort St. Nicholas. "Wait for me here, all of you," cried M. Morel. "I will take the first conveyance I find and hurry to Marseilles, whence I will bring you word how all is going on." "That's right," exclaimed a multitude of voices. "Go, and return as quickly as you can." The second departure was followed by a long and fearful state of terrified silence on the part of those who were left behind. The old father and Mercedes remained for some time apart, each absorbed in grief. But at length, the 2 poor victims of the same blow raised their eyes, and with a simultaneous burst of feeling rushed into each other's arms. Meanwhile, Fernand made his appearance, poured himself a glass of water with a trembling hand, then hastily swallowing it, went to sit down at the first vacant place, and this was, by mere chance, placed next to the seat on which poor Mercedes had fallen half fainting. When released from the warm and affectionate embrace of old Dante, instinctively Fernand drew back his chair. "He is the cause of all this misery. I am quite sure of it," whispered Caderousse, who had never taken his eyes off Fernand, to Danglars. "I don't think so," answered the other. "He's too stupid to imagine such a scheme. I only hope the mischief will fall upon the head of whoever wrought it." "You don't mention those who aided and abetted the deed," said Caderousse. "Surely," answered Danglars, "one cannot be held responsible for every chance arrow shot into the air." "You can indeed when the arrow lights point downward on somebody's head." Meanwhile, the subject of the arrest being canvassed in every different form. "What think you, Danglars," said one of the party, turning towards him, "of this event?" "Why," replied he, "I think it's just possible Dante may have been detected with some trifling article on board ship considered here as contraband. But how could he have done so without your knowledge, Danglars, since you are the ship's supercargo?" "Why, as for that, I could only know what I was told respecting the merchandise with which the vessel was laden. I know she was laden with cotton, and that she took in her freight at Alexandria from Pastret's warehouse, and at Smyrna from Pascal's. That is all I was obliged to know, and I beg I may not be asked for any further particulars." "Now I recollect," said the afflicted old father. "My poor boy told me yesterday he got a small case of coffee and another tobacco for me." "There you see," exclaimed Danglars. "Now the mischief is out. Depend upon the custom house people went rummaging about the ship in our absence and discovered poor Dante's hidden treasure. Mercedes, however, paid no heed to this explanation of her lover's arrest. Her grief, which she had hitherto tried to restrain, now burst out in a violent fit of hysterical sobbing. "Come, come," said the old man. "Be comforted, my poor child. There is still hope." "Hope? Hope," replied Danglars. "Hope," faintly murmured Fernand, but the words seemed to die away on his pale, agitated lips, and a convulsive spasm passed over his countenance. "Good news! Good news!" shouted forth one of the party stationed in the balcony on the lookout. "Here comes M. Morrel. No doubt we shall hear that our friend is released." Mercedes and the old man rushed to meet the shipowner and greeted him at the door. He was very pale. "What news?" exclaimed a general burst of voices. "Alas, my friends," replied M. Morrel with a mournful shake of his head, "the thing has assumed a more serious aspect than I expected." "Oh, indeed, sir, he is innocent," sobbed forth Mercedes. "That I believe," answered M. Morrel, "but still he is charged." "With what?" inquired elder Dante. "With being an agent of the Bonapartist faction. Many of our readers may be able to recollect how formidable such an accusation became in the period of which our story is dated." Oh, sorry. Many of our readers may be able to recollect how formidable an accusation became in the period at which our story is dated. It's a very serious crime. Just saying. Despairing cry escaped from the lips of poor Mercedes. The old man sank into a chair. "Ah, Danglars," whispered Catters, "you have deceived me. The trick you spoke of last night has been played, but I cannot suffer a poor old man or an innocent girl to die of grief through your fault. I am determined to tell them about it." "Be silent, you simpleton," cried Danglars, grasping him by the arm, "or I will not answer even for your own safety. Who can tell whether Dante be innocent or guilty? The vessel did touch at Elba, where he quitted it, and passed a whole day at the island. Now, should any letters or other documents of a compromising character be found upon him, will it not be taken for granted that all who uphold him are his accomplices?" With the rapid instinct of selfishness, Caderousse readily perceived the solidity of this mode of reasoning. He gazed, doubtfully, wistfully, on Danglars, and then cautiously supplanted generosity. "Suppose we wait a while and see what comes of it," said he, casting a bewildered look on his companion. "To be sure," answered Danglars. "Let us wait, by all means. If he be innocent, of course he will be set at liberty. If guilty, why, it is no use involving ourselves in a conspiracy." "Let us go, then. I cannot stay here any longer." "With all my heart," replied Danglars, pleased to find the other so tractable. "Let us take ourselves out of the way and leave things for the present to take their course." After their departure, Fernand who had now again become the friend and protector of Mercedes, led the girl to her home, while some friends of Dante conducted his father, nearly lifeless, to the Allées de Milan. The rumor of Edmond's arrest as a Bonapartist agent was not slow in circulating throughout the city. "Could you ever have credited such a thing, my dear Danglars?" asked Amorel, as, on his return to the port for purposing gleaning fresh tidings of Dante from M. de Villefort, the assistant procureur, he overtook his supercargo and Caterus. "Could you have believed such a thing possible?" "Why, you know I told you," replied Danglars, "that I considered the circumstance of his having anchored at the island of Elba a very suspicious circumstance." "And did you mention these suspicions to any person beside myself?" "Certainly not," returned Danglars, then added in a low whisper, "You understand that, on account of your uncle, M. Policar Morel, who served under the other government, and who does not altogether conceal what he thinks on the subject, you are strongly suspected of regretting the abdication of Napoleon. I should have feared to injure both Edmond and yourself had I divulged my own apprehensions to a soul. I am too well aware that though a subordinate, like myself, is bound to acquaint the shipowner with everything that occurs, there are many things he ought most carefully to conceal from all else." "'Tis well, Danglars, 'tis well," replied Morel. "You are a worthy fellow, and I had already thought of your interests in the event of poor Edmond having become the captain of the Pharaoh." "It is impossible you were so kind." "Yes, indeed. I had previously inquired of Dantes what his opinion of you, and if he should have any reluctance to continue you in your post, for somehow I perceived a sort of coolness between you." "And what was his reply?" "That he certainly did think he had given you offense in an affair in which he merely referred to without entertaining into particulars, but that whoever possessed the good opinion and confidence of the ship owners would have his preference always." "The hypocrites!" murmured Danglars. "Poor Dante!" "Poor Dante!" said Caterus. "No one can deny his being a noble-hearted young fellow." "But meanwhile," continued Morel, "here is the Pharaon without a captain." "Oh," replied Danglars, "since we cannot leave port for the next 3 months, let us hope that ere the expiration of that period Dante will be set at liberty." "No doubt. But in the meantime?" "I am entirely at your service, Morel. You know that I am as capable of managing a ship as the most experienced captain in the service, and it will be so far advantageous to you to accept my services that upon Edmond's release from prison no further change will be requisite on board the Pharaon than for Dantes and myself each to resume our respective posts." "Thanks, Danglars. That will smooth over all difficulties. I fully authorize you at once to assume the command of the Pharaon, and look carefully to the unloading of her freight. Private misfortunes must never be allowed to interfere with business." "Be easy on that score, Morel. But do you think we shall be permitted to see our poor Edmond?" I will let you know that directly I have seen M. de Valport, whom I shall endeavour to interest on Edmund's favour. I am aware that he is a furious royalist, but in spite of all that, and in spite of being King's attorney, he is a man like ourselves, and I fancy not a bad sort of one. Perhaps not, replied Danglars, but I hear he is ambitious, and that's rather against him. Well, well, returned Emerald, we shall see. But now hasten on board. I will join you there ere long. So saying, the worthy ship-owner quitted the two allies and proceeded in the direction of the Palais de Justice. You see, said Danglars, addressing Caderousse, the turn things have taken. Do you still feel any desire to stand up in his defense? Not in the slightest. But yet, it seems to me a shocking thing that a mere joke should lead to such consequences. But who perpetrated that joke, let me ask? Neither you nor myself, but Fernand. You knew very well that I threw the paper in the corner of the room. Indeed, I fancied I'd destroyed it. Oh, no, replied Caderousse. That I can answer for. You did not. I only wish I could see it now as plainly as I saw it lying all crushed and crumpled in a corner of the arbor. Well then, if you did, depend on it, Fernand picked it up and either copied it or caused it to be copied. Perhaps, even, he did not take the trouble of recopying it. And now I think of it, by heavens, he may have sent the letter itself. Fortunately for me, the handwriting was disguised. Then you are aware of Dantes being engaged in a conspiracy? Not I, as I said before. I thought the whole thing was a joke. Nothing more, it seems, however, that I have unconsciously stumbled upon the truth. Still, argued Caderousse, I would give a great deal if nothing of the kind had happened, or at least that I had no hand on it. You will see, Danglars, that it will turn out an unlucky job for both of us. Nonsense. If any harm come of it, it should fall on the guilty person, and that, you know, is Fernand. How can we be implicated in any way? All we have got to do is keep our own counsel and remain perfectly quiet, not breathing a word to any living soul, and you will see that the storm will pass away without in the least affecting us. Amen, responded Caderousse, waving his hand in token of adieu to Danglars, and bending his steps toward the Allée de Milan, moving his head to and fro, and muttering as he went, after the manner of one who was overcharged with absorbing idea. So far, then, said Danglars mentally, all has gone as I would have it. I am, temporarily, commander of Ferran, with the certainty of being permanently so if that fool of a Caderousse can be persuaded to hold his tongue. My only fear is the chance of Dante being released. But there, he is in the hands of justice, and, added he with a smile, she will take her own. So saying, he leapt into a boat, desiring to be rowed on board the Farron, where M. Morrel had agreed to meet him. And that will end our reading for tonight. Let us see about finding a raid target. Yeah. So we are going to raid on Twitch. My buddy goes in. On YouTube, I already know exactly where we're going to raid. We're going to raid my buddy. Oh, maybe not. We're going to be raiding Acme Studios, playing Phantasy Star 3, third episode. So, with that, let's end the stream. Thank you all for listening tonight. Tomorrow, at this same time, at 5 p.m. and 9 p.m., we'll be reading two different books. We'll be reading this book, The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway, something I know absolutely nothing about. And at 9, we will be reading The Island of Dr. Moreau. And believe me, this is going to be one heck of a doozy. If what I understand if what I know about it to be true, it's going to be a doozy. So, I'll see y'all over there. On Twitch, I'll see you on Gozens. On YouTube, I'll see you on Acme Studios. Have a wonderful night, everyone.